So yesterday was the anniversary for my first hospital stay with seizures. Um, Basically what happened last year was I was hospitalized yesterday last year, and they thought I'd had a stroke. I was slurring my speech and I couldn't be on my left side, and I couldn't remember some people's names and I was having problem with my movement as well. I couldn't walk properly. And then when I went to the doctor and I said, I feel really bad, and she was pinching my left side, and she thought that I had had a stroke as well. And when the ambulance came, they put some oxygen mask on my face, and the minute that happened, I was gone. I had my first seizure, and it was so scary. It was like completely being stuck in your body and not being able to move, and your brain was awake, and I was just panicking and thinking, oh god, I'm dying, oh god, I'm dying. And it was really emotional. So I got in the ambulance and I couldn't remember my brother's name, and my parents were away, so I was in the house on my own. So he rang me, I rang him, and I was saying to the ambulance driver, I don't know my brother's name. And he was like, well, how am I going to find it in your phone? And I found it in my phone. I said, there you go. That's his name, but I can't say it. And he was like, okay. And then he questioned me the whole way to the hospital if I was on any type of drugs. Or are you sure you didn't? Are you sure you didn't take anything last night, maybe? And I was like, no, I'm 100% sure. Meditation is my high. And I think he was just trying to keep me talking the whole way to the ambulance. And then the lights in the ambulance were so bright, and I was like, kept going in and out of consciousness, couldn't figure out what was going on. So I got to Connolly, and they were like, we don't know what's going on. So over the next week, they tested me for everything. I got a CT scan on my brain. They had me on a heart monitor. They had me on a drip. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. So after about a week of not being able to find anything, and the physio tested me, and she said, oh, you're fine. And I said, well, how come I can't walk up the stairs, or how come my leg keeps going from underneath me, my left leg? And she said, okay, we'll give you a walking stick just in case. But so they let me out the next Wednesday. It was the Friday I went in, and the next Wednesday they let me out. So I went home and everything was fine, but I was still struggling walking and everything like that. And then on the Sunday, I went to my aunt's with my mum, and she gave me an Easter egg. So I sat there and I was eating the Easter egg, and I find out now, months later, that chocolate tends to trigger seizures. And I went home, and there was a lot of flashing lights, like when the light comes through the trees. So the whole way home, I was like, oh my god, it's going to happen again. I can feel the way I felt that morning. So I got home and I lay down on the couch, and I was like, it's happening again. And I started having seizures. And I was calling my mum and dad, but they couldn't hear me in the kitchen. So I think I threw the walking stick at the door, because my right arm was still working, but I was still like mid seizure and I couldn't speak properly. So I was like kind of going, because I couldn't shout. So anyway, they came in and they could see that I was having like quite violent seizures, and they brought me back to the hospital. So I went back to A&E in Connolly, and they hooked me up to a drip, and I spent the night. And whatever they gave me seemed to work. I had about 20 bad seizures that night. So over the next few weeks, I was basically bedridden. I was having these seizures all the time. And eventually my family were like, we have to do something else. And Connolly, one of the nurses in Ashley Connolly told me, the next time you have to go into A&E, don't come to Connolly, because there's no one who can really help you with neurological problems. And I was like, what do you mean neurological problems? And he was like, trust me, go to Bowman, they're the experts in this. So I was like, I'm fairly sure I'm having seizures. And he said, I saw you have one, and I'm fairly sure that's a seizure. So the next time I went to A&E, I was pretty bad, and Mum brought me, And I remember getting an MRI on my brain, and again they were like, there's no sign on your brain of any damage, so if you had epilepsy there'd be marks on your brain to show that there was damage. So they were like completely confused. So I stayed in a wheelchair for a few hours, and at one point I turned to my mum and I was like, I don't know who this woman is beside me, I don't know how I got here, oh my god. And my brain was completely melting. Eventually I had so many seizures and they started getting so violent that the nurses actually felt kind of embarrassed, and they wheeled me off and pulled out of bed out of nowhere. Now this is in a packed A&E in Beaumont, and put me on the bed, and I was shaking so bad that the nurse was holding me back down on one side and my mum was holding me down the other, and I was just like, just make it stop, just make it stop. So at this stage I stayed until about midnight, and a neurological doctor came down, and he said to me, I think you have a traumatic seizure disorder. It's a non-epileptic disorder. And he checked my eyes, and the minute he shone the lights in my eyes, I was gone. I was in another seizure. And he was like, this is definitely non-epileptic. So he sent me home at midnight. So I got a taxi home, and basically from there on I got an appointment with the doctor, Dr. Norman Delante, one of the head neurologists in Beaumont in the epilepsy section. I then went in for a week to Beaumont in the epilepsy ward, and they hooked me up to machines where they glued these nodes to my brain or to my hair. Like the glue matted my hair for like 2 weeks. It was like trying to get that stuff out of my hair. But and I was hooked up to a monitor, so I couldn't leave the bed. Like if I had to go to the bathroom, I had to call somebody, detach myself, and then go to the bathroom. So I was just left there for a few days, and they had a camera on me as well, so they watched all the seizures, and eventually they were about 100 a day at that stage. So it was starting to get really bad. So the doctors came in to me on the last day when I was going home, and they said, we think you have NEAD, which is non-epileptic attack disorder. It can be triggered by a trauma, and that you have to go to a neurological psychologist for this. So sadly, the neurological psychologists in Ireland are absolutely booked up, so I'm on a 2-year waiting list. So for the last year, what I've been doing is I've been practicing every type of holistic therapy. Obviously, anyone who knows me knows I'm a holistic therapist for the last 11 years. And I've done CBT at home, I've tried havening, theta healing, Reiki, I started doing Akashic healing last year, and I've done everything to kind of dredge up anything that might be causing this trauma. So I couldn't read until about a few weeks ago. I actually couldn't read books. My hands still shake sometimes, I still get seizures, but they're not as bad. I'm on anti-inflammatory painkillers, NSAIDs, and an anti-anxiety drug to make sure any of my anxiety doesn't trigger off the seizures. So that's me for the moment. I've gone from not being able to walk to the car, to get into the car to go to the hospital, to now I can go on long walks. Those days where I don't use the walking stick. I started to learn how to read again properly without getting dizzy. Sometimes when I'm tired, or I haven't had enough sleep, or if I'm hungry or if I'm dehydrated, it tends to trigger off my symptoms worse. Some food is actually a trigger as well. And basically this is something I'm going to have for the rest of my life. Some people do go into remission with FND, and is what the term of I have as well. FND is a very complex thing. It's called functional neurological disorder. Sorry, I'm getting a bit dizzy now. And functional neurological disorder basically means it's the brain is sending the wrong signals to the body. So the brain will send my right leg has to go this way and my left leg has to go that way. So it's very difficult to force my legs to walk forward, so it causes a lot of pain. It causes a lot of sensory problems, so I can't smell some days I can. Some days I can smell a really strong smell that isn't there, so it's like it's in my memory. And then I can't feel stabbing pain in my left arm, so I could get a fork and stab my arm and I wouldn't feel it. I feel weird flushes of hot and cold. Taste is weird. One day I was drinking a cup of coffee and it tasted like garbage, which was not very nice. And then some days I get really sweet taste in my mouth when I haven't eaten food for like the last hour. So it's very weird. It's really hard to adjust because you're used to your senses working a certain way. It's been a difficult year, but I've really come along. And this is FND Awareness Month. And I just wanted to release this video to show people that like FND is a legitimate disorder. Sorry, my speech is slurring a bit now. I talk too long and this happens. Just to be aware that like there's a lot of people suffering with invisible illnesses out there, and that FND is a legitimate disorder that can cause a lot of problems for people, and that obviously anyone with FND at the moment is having to cocoon because it causes a lot of problems with your immune system. Obviously you're on a lot more pain medication which causes trouble, so that's why I'm cocooning at the moment. And that is pretty much it. But if you ever have any questions about what FND is or what NEAD is, please let me know. But I'd like to share this video far and wide to let people know what FND and NEAD are, basically. And happy FND Awareness Month.